Happy Thanksgiving Eve and welcome to Cedar Weekly, home of innovation and creation, where you can tune in to read and listen to up and coming artists sharing about the future of art and business, while at the same time connect you with hundreds of individuals making a difference. Today I'm here with Frank James, and here comes a thick bio. He is first and foremost a YouTuber with over 50 million collective views and over 400,000 subscribers. His channel focuses primarily on the Myers-Briggs types through entertaining sketches and informational videos, complete with dry wit and a myriad of hairstyles. The channel also has a particular focus on introverted types, INFJs, who we both happen to be, and a weird Ellen DeGeneres obsession, question mark. He also hosts his own podcast and dabbles in music production and other self-help related endeavors. So without further ado, welcome, Frank James. Did that about sum it up?
It summed it up, yeah. I think I'm over my weird Ellen phase, but thank you for that. But JJ, thanks for having me on the podcast, and happy Thanksgiving Eve. So excited about Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Um, well, yeah, just thank you for being here today. And I know you're a busy man and you've got a lot to do, but I wanted to start out by asking you if we were today on a reality TV show, what could we expect to see on a regular day-to-day updates?
Like just my normal day
Like, yeah,
going
what's
through
your
it.
daily routine as a creator, as a producer?
Well, it's interesting, when you're working for yourself and it's creative, you're kind of, even if it wasn't creative, it might be like this. I basically, as soon as I get up, I make coffee, sit here, and then start working on my videos in one way or another. Um, Sometimes it's researching, what's the next thing I want to do, or writing the uh, the script for something. Occasionally, it's editing, and then sometimes my research is actually just watching YouTube videos to
Mm.
see what's out there. Uh, and then I usually just don't record until afternoon. I feel like I'm sharper once my body has time to kind of like get up to speed. And sometimes it's usually like, I don't know, between 1 and 6 in the afternoon is when I'll do any filming. Although sometimes it's later. Sometimes I won't start shooting till 10 at night. It just
Wow.
depends.
Okay.
Yeah, so the routine is a bit malleable, but it's usually working all day in some capacity or another. But it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, but it usually includes all those aspects.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what takes up a lot of time is thumbnails. Just making the thumbnail for a video will take a long time often, um, because you gotta like that's the thing that grabs people.
Yeah, it's the first thing you see. So I'm curious. You're obviously primarily a YouTuber, and what was that initial inspiration for you to become a YouTuber? Has that inspiration changed for you over the years?
Yeah, I think I just liked YouTube. I had a few YouTubers I was following who I liked, some of whom were small channels that were like more in the mbti niche that I ended up going into. And then some were the big ones like Casey Neistat that everyone knows.
Hmm.
And I think I had always wanted to do some kind of filmmaking thing. My background is in theater, so performance and, writing for the stage was something that I was already in, but I felt like I wanted the potential for more exposure and also the ability to control every aspect of what I was doing because, in theater, it's very collaborative. So you can only
Hmm.
really do one part and you have a bunch of other people working on a play. So it initially just started out as something I didn't think would go anywhere. And I was just making videos that were kind of confessional in style, just me talking about how I was feeling and stuff that was happening. And a few people started watching. So I was like, oh, nice, I have an audience. So I would try to make things a little bit, more entertaining, try to up my production value.
Yeah.
And then there was a certain point after I had taken a long break, and I noticed during the break that my subscriber count was slowly going up. Like I'd get another subscriber every week or so. And I was like, wow, I'm not even doing anything and people are subscribing. So I thought, why don't I actually try to succeed at this and, figure out what's going to get, views, and how can I learn the material, like learn about Myers-Briggs more so I can teach people. And it went from there. And I think in some ways the inspiration has always been the same, because it's always, how can I reach a bigger audience? How can I get eyes on the videos I'm making? And it's, to me, that's very exciting and invigorating to just play around with what's going to get people to click, what's going to get their attention.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I'm sure that's challenging in a very ever-changing market. But I know at first you started out on your YouTube channel creating very, almost like, it was almost kind of a vlog, not necessarily a vlog, but it was very upfront, personal,
Yeah.
just what was on your mind at the time. I think your first video was like just you at 4 a.m. on New Year's talking about your social anxiety and your depression.
Yeah.
And now I feel like you've adopted much more of a TV personality, like persona, where it's almost like a show you're putting on of the day. Like you have the news segment, you have the 16 personality type segment, and you have a few others that you consistently do. Uh, so I'm curious, what kind of created that shift in your channel?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it is one that has happened, especially over the last year. I think part of it is just having a larger audience. You become inevitably more self-aware in a sense. And,
Mm-hmm.
it might sound silly, but when you have only 10,000 subscribers, making a really confessional video doesn't seem like it's going to be seen by a lot of people. Even
Yeah.
even at the time, even when my channel was, that big, it didn't seem like it was going to do much. But now that, I've had several videos that have gotten 1 million views, and you just never know. Sometimes there are videos I make. There was one in particular called I Lost Her Forever, which was just like a silly video I made
I remember that
about
one.
meeting this girl at the airport. And
Uh,
I thought it wouldn't do anything, and it got like over 100,000 views. So it just goes to show you that anything you put out there could get a lot of attention.
mm-hmm.
And, it's something I've thought about, like, how can I get back to being a little bit more raw on camera? But it's definitely hard. Like, it's not an easy thing. Plus,
Yeah.
your audience reacts to those things in a certain way, and sometimes it is, on the one hand, it's good because it makes them very dedicated to you when you're being very open about things. But then it also can leave you feeling like, maybe I shouldn't have been that
Mm-hmm.
open. Maybe I gave people too much information. And, it is the internet, it is YouTube. So you can get people who are not so friendly, who will take the vulnerable stuff you give them and, ridicule you for it. And
Yeah.
so I was trying, so there's multiple reasons why that shift happened. Plus, I think the I like the persona more, like creating a persona
Mm-hmm.
and
More
performing.
theatrical.
Yeah. And even, to a degree, even when I was being the more confessional vlog style, there was some element of performance in it, because I don't think you can turn on a camera
Yeah.
and not do that. But that's my opinion. And, coming from a performance background, it's hard to get out of the mindset of, when am I performing? When am I not?
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
so yeah. So now I'm trying to figure out, how do you show up very authentically, but also keep your boundaries and don't let the audience feel like um, you're showing them too much, or,
Yeah.
like
Oversharing.
you're falling apart on camera, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. There is definitely that's probably a really hard line to walk as a creator. But I know in some of your earlier videos, like I mentioned, you talk about your social anxiety. Do you think that played a bit into this transition? And I obviously now with Thanksgiving coming up for a lot of people who maybe aren't as extroverted or that sort of personality, how do you think you've been able to grow as a person maybe through your work and your process? Have you seen that happen?
Yeah, that's a good question because when I first started on YouTube, I was a pretty different person in some regards than I am now. And I think a lot of it was just confidence. I had very little confidence in a lot of areas, and I didn't really like putting myself out there. And I didn't think that um, I didn't think that I could accomplish very much. And there were a lot of things in my life going on that made me think that way and made me feel like I was behind my peers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think just through doing YouTube, that has like changed all those things. Like I've become more confident. I've become uh, able to kind of talk to anyone and feel not nervous. You know, like this kind of thing a couple years ago would have made me sick to my stomach nervous, like
Mm-hmm.
as it was coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've done enough interviews and talked to enough people that it's just sort of like I show up and I'm like, okay, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of just getting the reps in, you know, because I'm to the point now where I'm like, did I ever really have social anxiety? Well, because it's like it's not really there now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what it goes to show is that everyone is capable of way more than they think they are, and there's just a lot of limiting ideas that we, you know, have where it's like, oh, I couldn't do that, I could never be that successful. And it's really just putting in a little bit of work day by day to improve that it eventually snowballs. Because yeah, 2-3 years ago I couldn't have in like a week gotten to
Mm-hmm.
where I am now, but it's like every day over the course of a few years you work your way towards it.
Yeah. And it's interesting you bring that up because for you, I feel like it's been a very positive process. But I know obviously with technology, it has very bad stigma of how it can bring out the negative sides of anxiety and depression. So I'm curious, was how have you made your channel kind of to combat that? How has your path been different so that it has been helpful? Because I know a lot of people find themselves on these platforms that maybe have negative tendencies. And how do you think they would be able to spin it in a way that would be more of a positive than a negative?
Yeah, well, yeah, and it hasn't always been 100% positive. Because yeah, and it's true, like on YouTube the comment section can be
Mm-hmm. Brutal.
toxic. Yeah, it can be awful. And I think I'm lucky in some ways because of the niche that I'm in, talking about personality, that it just attracted a lot of people who wanted to be positive. And although you know, even in that niche it's not necessarily always positive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did get along the way negative comments, and you know, still get them now. And there have been times where they really got to me and they really made me um not it's like sometimes it takes the wind out of your sails, where it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I don't want to open myself up for someone to, you know, take shots at me.
Yeah.
And you know, beyond that, as your channel gets bigger, then other people make videos about you, and you know, some are nice, some are not nice.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something I had to process, because it wasn't just like I could shut it out. Like some of it bothered me a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just sometimes I feel like the theme of my life sometimes is just forcing yourself to keep going, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and focus on the people who are positive. Focus on the ones that, you know, tell you that they really love this video and that it meant so much to them. And even now, like it's easy for me to say, oh, this one video wasn't very good, but then someone will say to me, no, that video meant a lot. And I've been meeting in person now, not in person, but virtually. I've been having
Yeah.
one-on-one meetings as kind of like a coaching thing with a lot of people who are viewers of my channel, and a lot of them tell me like how much these videos meant to them that I thought, you know, how they couldn't have been that meaningful, but it clearly made a big difference in people's lives. So
Mm-hmm.
being able to focus on the positive feedback and then also take the negative feedback with a grain of salt, and also realize that when people leave comments, when people are negative about you, that's in a way a good sign, because it's like they were so bothered by you, they took the time to write something. You know,
Yeah.
I think apathy would be worse.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it can be a mindset shift that way, where it's like, hey, people took the time to say how much they didn't like my video, and in some ways they're trying to help me out. They wouldn't put that if they didn't want me to see that and say, hey, I got to be better next time. So you know, a lot of it's just like a mindset shift and just forcing yourself to keep going, even if you're like, well, these people hate my stuff. Because it's easy
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
it's so easy to
It's easy
focus
to
on the
take it
negative,
personal.
even if it's even if it's not
Mm-hmm.
much. It's easy to focus on it, and sometimes you just have to tune it out and just ignore it, and that's another way of going about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sort of switching gears, but talking
Yeah.
about 16 personality types as creative people, um, I feel like a lot of INFJs have maybe a tendency to take on almost a chameleon-like approach to social settings, adapting to what people want rather than maybe what is initially what you desire. So I'm curious, how have you, and bringing in the last question as well, you know, dealing with these comments and these critiques that some are nicer than others, how do you still keep the product your own while trying to always be like pandering in a sense to your audience as well?
Yeah, that is the key as a creator, to be able to walk that line, especially on YouTube, where you get instant feedback for
Mm,
everything, and it can seem overwhelming sometimes. And you see people who go extremes in one way or the other. You see some people who are just doing whatever they want, and sometimes it works out for them if they happen to find the right thing and it lines up with what the audience wants to see. But sometimes it ends up where people just keep going down a road that's leading them towards failure ultimately, and the audience abandons them.
yeah.
But then you see the opposite happen sometimes, where people are so, they're trying to please their audience so much that people are like, I don't want to watch this person anymore,
Hmm.
because they just don't seem to have a direction of their own.
Yeah.
And you know, you'll see them like posting on the community page, what kind of video do you want to see next, guys? You got to tell me, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so you have to act like the captain of that ship. You have to be the
Hmm.
one directing it and take final responsibility for what you're going to do, but also keep an eye out to see how are things playing, how do people seem to like what I'm doing, and then also being proactive to see what, like doing your research to see what kind of videos will work on YouTube.
Hmm.
um, and thinking of it sort of in a way of, where's the Venn diagram of what I want to do and what I think they'll watch, and
Yeah.
overlapping them. And occasionally, maybe you try doing something you don't want to do, but you think the audience wants to see. And occasionally try doing something that you want to do and you don't care if the audience wants to see it. You know, so
Yeah. Mixing up a bit.
yeah, it's a back and forth, and sometimes going those extremes can work out, and it can teach you something that you didn't know, either about yourself and what you like to make, or what the audience likes to see. And I think that's also why it's good. I mean, this is like kind of getting outside the scope of the question, but I've always tried to post a lot of videos, and I think that's part of the reason why, is that I'm always just trying to test what will work.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like such a big failure when you know you have another video coming out in a few days, if it
That's,
flops, you
yeah.
know.
No, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, I feel like so much of the creative process is, you know, throwing things out there, and then sometimes people think it's garbage and sometimes people think it's gold. So it's just a learning process, I think, regardless of what your medium is, YouTube or music or art or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, you know, I'm a big Beatles fan and a big like Paul McCartney and Wings
Mm-hmm.
fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it that way, like he had when he was doing his solo albums, he had some that were big flops and then some that were big hits. And this
Yeah.
is Paul McCartney. You know, this is like one of the
Music's great.
greatest, yeah, one of the greatest songwriters and recording artists, if not the greatest of the 20th century. And even he had ups and downs. And it's not like, and even the bad albums have good stuff on them. So it's just like, not to, I try not to freak out when I have a video that doesn't do as well as I thought it should. And just remind myself that it's a cycle, and it, you know, I'll have better ideas one day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this kind of takes this discussion in a new direction, but I'm just curious about broadening this a little bit to all of the 16 personality types. Do you think that creativity is accessible for all 16 types, and that maybe the diversity of responses you see in today's culture of what creativity looks like is a part of that, of so many different personalities having their own idea of what is creative and what's not?
Yeah, that's a good question, because there are certain types that are like more stereotypically creative than others.
Yeah.
And I think that there are certain types that, if you get into the nitty gritty of, you know, what makes up a type, there are certain ones that will more naturally just know what is aesthetically pleasing, etc. But I think, um, yeah, any type could be creative. It might not be necessarily in all the same ways, you know, not
Mm-hmm.
all the same forms. Because, you know, for example, I'm trying, like, I feel like an ESTJ might be stereotypically the least artistic of the types.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's like the executive type. They're more about, like, you know,
Black and
logic and
white,
yeah.
and yeah.
But there's no reason why they couldn't. Because if you look at the, you know, they have all the same parts of their personality as, say, an INFP, which is a lot more artistic stereotypically.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of them figuring out, like, how they're expressing themselves, um, like what form their creativity takes shape. The other side of it is creativity can be in, like, any, it doesn't have to be in the arts, you know.
Yeah.
You could be in business, you could be an entrepreneur and be very creative,
Yeah.
and, you know, it's just in, like, how you structure a business or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think, you know, when we're talking about personality type, like, any type could be creative, and it definitely manifests itself in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great answer. I think that's kind of what I was imagining, was that maybe creativity is more just a form of self-expression, and so it can take a lot more forms than maybe what's traditionally considered to be creative in society.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's, you look at someone like, I don't know, Steve Jobs, and
Mm-hmm.
he was highly creative, even though it's like he wasn't, you know, writing music, but,
Yeah.
you know, highly creative person. Many examples of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, moving on to another segment I like to do. This is just a fun thing, some rapid fire questions, if you're cool
Ooh,
with
yeah.
that. There, some are humorous, some are more serious. You can answer it however you like, or
Okay.
just spur of the moment. So there's going to be 10 of these, and we'll just fire through them. Okay.
Gotcha.
Do you think your YouTube channel will be a good starting point for aliens invading the Earth?
Uh, no, they'll be confused.
If you were a chef, what would your signature dish be named?
Ooh, I don't, I'm trying to think. I don't know. Uh,
The Frank's.
spaghetti a la Frank. I don't
There we
know.
go. Classy. Who is Timmy?
Timmy, that's just that's a character that came about a couple years ago, I made a video called "Can You Be Two Personality Types?" or "Can You Be INFJ and INFP?"
Uh-huh.
And I made up this character called Two Type Timmy, who was this little kid who thought that he was two different types, and eventually he became a recurring character mentioned in the 16 personality sketches.
It just keeps showing up. Yeah. If
Yeah.
you had to be another personality type, which would you choose?
Ooh. Um, Maybe ESTP, just because
Okay.
it's the opposite of INFJ.
Just to see what it's like.
Yeah. See the other half there.
Yeah. Um, if you were forced to stick with one of your past hairstyles that you've had for the rest of your life, what would you choose?
Well, I think my favorite is like the more Beatle haircut that I had about a year ago. And
Okay.
yeah, I like that more, but I don't think the audience liked it. So that's why I went back to this.
The wave, yeah.
Yeah, I could tell my views were going down, and I was like, I got to do something.
Oh man. Well, okay, what is your favorite vinyl in your record collection?
Wow. That's a good question because I've got a lot in there, and I'm trying to think
What's
of.
your like current favorite maybe?
Okay, I would say the my favorite vinyl that I have is an album called "Effet Miroir" by Zaz, who is a French singer, and that it came out a year or two ago, and I just really like her music, and that album in particular is really good. And having it on vinyl is cool because it's like the big,
Oh,
180 gram
yeah.
vinyl, and it's blue, and yeah.
That's awesome. I hadn't heard of that artist, so I could check that out.
Yeah, it's funny because she's like, huge in France,
France.
and then no one over here
No one knows
knows
in the
her. Yeah.
US. Yeah. What how often do you think is healthy to cry?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, on an as needed basis, I
Every
don't cry very often, and
Never.
but I don't know what's the definition of crying? Because if we're just going as far as tearing up
Mm.
and no tears fall down the cheeks, and I'm not like sobbing, I tear up once a week, once every other week, but I don't have a full on like tears rolling down my face, me sobbing like
It's
that
not
happens
it's not part of your
rarely.
daily routine.
No,
No.
no. But but I do if I feel like I need to cry, like if something bad has happened or will happen,
Uh,
and I feel like I need to get it out, I will force myself to do it rather than try to hold it off. So I think that's why it's as needed. Don't suppress it. Especially because I think a lot of times, I know this is lightning round. We we try to hold the tears off because it's like I won't have to accept the reality of what's going on if I don't
mhm.
cry. And I think it's much better to just do it, get through it, and feel better.
Feel better on the other side. Yeah. No, good answer. What is your favorite type of muffin?
I
Going
really like
philosoph
uh,
philosophical here.
I really like chocolate chip. Like
Oh,
that's a pretty
good
good
choice.
one.
Yeah.
The best muffin I ever had was in New York City at a diner where they like cut it in half and put it on the griddle.
Oh,
Man, it
a
was so
grilled
good.
muffin. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, two more. Here we go. What part of your body would you most likely to have framed in an art museum?
Well, I mean, does the whole face count?
Yeah, sure, yeah. It would go for millions.
I feel like that's
Excuse me, billions.
yeah. Either that or my feet, because I feel like I've got good looking feet, but
You missed your chance to become a foot model.
I
Or
know.
maybe you could still take that in a new
Second
direction.
career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lastly, a little more serious, but what advice would you give to someone who looks up to you?
It's the thing that I have been, like I said it earlier in this one, and I keep hammering it home whenever I have a chance to, but it's that you can accomplish way more than you think you can.
Hmm.
And don't tell yourself that you can't. like you need to be a little bit delusional. Like you'll think you're delusional for thinking you can accomplish things, but that's what you need in order to get where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Finally, I just like to move into a time to talk about this year a little bit and 2020 and all that's gone on. And I know for creatives and non-creatives, this has been a hard year, obviously, but I want to know how you personally stay afloat as a creative person during these difficult times.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, there's two sides of this. On the one side, I'm in like a weird uh, industry where I have thrived during
Mm-hmm.
this because it's
Yeah,
like
because it's,
people are at home watching YouTube.
yeah,
But on the other hand, it's like, yeah, your creative well might run dry faster because even though I'm introverted, I enjoy going places and, kind of getting out of my apartment. And even if it's just, going to a Starbucks and
mm-hmm.
sitting there for a couple hours and just, you know, being
People
in a
watching.
different place. Yeah, people watching,
Yeah,
I feel like moving to different locations just gets your mind uh, working a bit. And different ideas come to you if you're in different places. So that's been tough because it's like a little bit more stuck in one spot, and you have to kind of
yeah.
create the
The environment that
the
gives you
environment.
those
And
ideas. Yeah.
yeah, or go for walks outside, and it's not quite the same as being able to people watch and whatever. um yeah, so I think that's been the one drawback. But your question was, how do I stay positive? What was the
Like,
question
how do you
exactly?
just, my word was afloat, but how do you,
Stay afloat. Yeah.
during, like, how do you just, how have you been able to err more on the side of thriving rather than just kind of being trampled by this year? And it's okay if you, I mean, I don't think you have been trampled by this year because you've been very successful, but
Yeah, yeah.
maybe for people who have been trampled by this year.
Yeah, well, especially if you are, for instance, in music and you do a lot of live performances or theater where that's
Mm-hmm.
been like closed down, I can see how it would be really difficult to uh, feel like you can carry on doing that. And I guess a lot of the way to stay afloat is to continue to set goals for yourself. Like, even though certain avenues are cut off, try to set goals that you can achieve and move toward them.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a musician, it's like, okay, I'm going to write 10 new songs. I'm going to, even if you can't make money off of it right now, even if you can't do, you know, the thing, the action that you want to, you can still get ready for it. You can
Yeah.
still keep things flowing, because I think with creativity, the most important thing is to keep it moving all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Keep it
And
fresh.
yeah, yeah. And the times in my life where I've been most prolific have been when I'm just always working. So just always producing something, even before I was doing anything that an audience was seeing. Like, if I was just writing music or writing plays or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
if I just got in the habit of always doing it and setting goals for myself, that kept me going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious as well. I mean, 2020 has been a year with more issues than just COVID-19, especially here in the United States. And I'm curious, do you think art or creative people, or however you want to look at it, what word you want to use, do you think there's a part of that could be a solution for the future, or do you even see that as something that could happen?
Yeah, because I think, well, it's interesting when you look back at, generationally, just the music in particular, that music from like the late 60s, early 70s, where there was, I mean, the upheaval then might
Yeah, a
have
lot of
been,
political music.
yeah, yeah, the music was like speaking to these wider issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also good. Like, it wasn't just purely for the purposes of propaganda or anything.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
like, you look at Graham Nash's album, Songs for Beginners. Like, a lot of that is love songs, but there's, Military Madness on it, and Chicago. these songs where people could sing them and get behind them, but it's also, you know, trying to bring people together, I
Yeah.
guess. And I think that's one of the issues, is that people feel like wary of everyone else. You know, there's just this feeling of, everyone is in their own camp. And I think art is good because it can show us that we all have more in common than we have different, you know, no matter what we look like or what we think, that we're all human, we're all sharing the planet.
Yeah.
We're sharing this country if you're, you know, in America. So yeah, I think creativity and expressing, you know, those kind of deeper human truths while addressing some of um, the anxieties of the time can definitely help.
Yeah. Yeah. Great answer. And yeah, I again just want to say thank you, Frank, for being with us. And I'm curious as well to know what I can share with the audience about what you're working on right now, because I know fairly recently you did a seminar, NF Connect, and on relationships and productivity and identity development. Do you think you'll do anything like that again, or any other things we should be looking out for in the future?
It's entirely possible that I will do something like that again. I don't have it on the books as of now, but yeah, there will be. I enjoyed doing that live. It was like a live virtual event, and I had a lot of fun doing it. I'd never done it before,
Mm,
so I didn't know how it would turn out, and it turns out it went better than I could have hoped. So
that's great.
yeah, I think I'm really just working on YouTube, on getting videos out. And at some point, who knows, I've been thinking about writing a book maybe about personality types,
Mm,
trying to get that out there. But yeah, that's really about it. Just trying to focus in on YouTube.
awesome. Yeah, and I'll add the links below because I'm a fan, obviously, and I think that a lot of what you have will be very applicable for anyone. I mean, that's the cool thing about your channel is it might have more of a tendency to lean on the introverted, introspective side, but I think it
Yeah.
still has something for everyone. And lastly, I wanted to ask as well for people interested in taking a 16 personality type and MBTI test. Do you have any that you'd recommend? And any, I mean, you even did a video on the 16 types taking the test. Do you
Yeah.
think there's a way as well that maybe you can be more objective about it, especially for maybe adults who are more self-critical of their
Yeah.
style of choosing questions?
Right, yeah. And it's tough, well, especially if you know anything about the test and what the letters mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to answer truthfully. I think tests online can be like a good starting point, and they seem to occasionally be correct. So I'm not totally opposed to them, but I think people get too caught up in them. I think, you know, I had one that was it was actually a sponsor on my channel, but I quite liked the test, and they're called Cloverleaf. If
Mm,
you like Google Cloverleaf 16 types test or whatever. But even, you know, the 16personalities.com test, even though I give it grief all the time, that can be a starting point.
uh-huh.
It's not perfect, but it can be a starting point. I think the best way to figure out your type is really to learn, unfortunately, learn about, you know, and so to get super complicated and nerdy, it's not just about letter dichotomies, as I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure JJ, you know, but it's about like the cognitive functions, the 8
Yeah.
cognitive functions, and how each type uses those. And that's where it really, that's where the rubber really meets the road, if you will. And so learning about the functions and then trying to evaluate yourself, like trying to catch yourself throughout the day to be like, why did I make that decision? Why did I get upset when this thing
Mm-hmm.
happened? Like, what's really going on here?
Being
And
self-analytical.
yeah. And it's tough because a lot of times we go through life on autopilot and we're not analyzing ourselves, and we think that things happen because of outside forces, but it's really us who put it into a certain, we put ourselves in that situation.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot of stuff about cognitive functions at Objective Personality, and they have a website and a YouTube channel just called Objective Personality. And if anyone watching wants me to evaluate them, I also have a typing service. If you go to infj.me/talk or infj.me/advice, those are two options where you can, talk to me, and I'll give you my opinion on what your type is. But it's ultimately, that's just like a shortcut for you doing it yourself,
Yeah. Well, great. Yeah, thank you. And I'm sure this will be helpful for a lot of people watching this. So thank you. And again, thank you so much for being a part of this today. It's such a privilege to talk to you, Frank. And yeah, hopefully people can continue to be connected. And I'm excited to see as well what you'll continue to be creating. So,
well, thanks, JJ, and thanks for having me on the podcast. It was a great time. You asked me a lot of questions I haven't been asked before, so that was good. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm flattered. But yeah, thank you, everyone, for joining us on week 8 of Cedar Weekly. And see you next week for another exclusive interview with influencer and adventure enthusiast Ethan Morris. So see you next time.